Hi, this is Caitlin Bryant for ACTE 699 Data Analysis, and I'm going to tell you about the data I've collected. But first, I would like to talk about the activity as a whole, so you have an understanding of what I did. Let's first talk about the kids involved. I focused on my CP Bio classes, which are 9th graders, and I focused on the year 2019 and 2020. And I picked out 2 classes from each that were approximately about the same size altogether. In my 2019, I had 21 males and 13 females, which gave me a total of 34 students with a total of 5 IEPs and 504s. In 2020, I had 19 males, 16 females currently, and only 2 IEPs and 504s. The classes are held at approximately the same time. My 2019 classes were 4th and 6th period, and 2020 they're 4th and 7th period, so there's a little variation there in time. They're both approximately sized. One class had 24, the other one had 23, and then another one had 12 and 11. So they were approximately sized. I was very fortunate to find 2 groups that were so similar. Both cases, there's a majority of males versus females as well. The activity itself was a big demo activity for the first unit of the year, and that's the properties of water activity. Throughout the unit, they've been learning about the properties of water and what causes them, and learning about bonding and atoms and polarity. And now they really get to look at that and see how that works. So in 2019, as some of the previous years as well, the activity itself was very scaffolded, and it walked kids through each property. You need to use this, this, and this to recreate this. This is what it looks like here. Answer these couple follow-up questions about it. Actually, the picture in the corner there is the molecules that they had access to for a majority of those activities. They're really neat water magnet molecules, which I also gave access to my students in 2020 to use as well. But the difference in 2020 is I did not give any instructions in terms of how to demonstrate the properties. They needed to tell me what the properties were from their learning. They needed to explain why they happened, and they needed to come up with real-world examples and models of that and document that for me. And that was a big difference. And it wasn't the first inquiry activity they had done before, but it was definitely a new one for them to see. And that was the biggest difference, because I wanted to see how inquiry would affect the learning process. So the data I collected for this were pre-tests for the unit, post-tests, the actual activity grades as a whole, and then I calculated growth from pre to post-test to see if there was a difference. Here's what I found. Now, I was a little concerned looking at my data, and I will show you it here. I've also attached it to the discussion as well. It's a little small here, but you can look at it closer at your leisure. I set up everything nicely, protected my students' identity, recorded the gender, pre-tests, activity scores, post-tests, and growth. And then I looked at a couple of things. So the first thing that I was worried about was I noticed that this year's group, my pre-tests and post-tests, were lower than they were in previous years. In fact, my analysis skill was seemed to go downhill. Now that concerned me, but when I actually input the data, it actually, for growth, wasn't that big of a significant difference, because for my growth, I still had an overall mean growth that was about the same, and it increased a bit from 2019 to 2020. So my mean growth overall from pre to post test in 2019 was approximately 23.4%, and in 2020 it was 25.4%. So that, to me, showed a growth, but what I really needed to determine is, was this a significant growth? So the first thing I looked at were the standard deviations, which I also have on there. I've calculated them towards the bottom here and here. And they were actually relatively low standard deviations. My data wasn't everywhere, so that was nice. And then I compiled my data into a t-test. For those of you who are not used to statistical tests, this shows significance based on expected outcome. Now, I didn't have a major expected outcome. I just wanted to see what would happen. In my head, I would like them to go one way, but for this, I was leaving it open. So I'm going to look at the p-values here for significance. Now, in order for data to be significant, a p-value must be lower than 0.05 for it to be considered unique data, something that is really significant. And mine was not. Mine was a larger number, and therefore there was no significance to the data, despite the fact that previously I saw an increase in the mean. That was not considered significant. Now, what this did tell me is, despite the pandemic and despite all the chaos going on, my students are still learning and growing overall in their knowledge base, which was good. And despite all the stressors and chaos and restrictions, they are still learning at about approximately the same level. But based on sample size, pandemic situation, various other human error and technical problems, this data is not significant. That being said, if situations changed, if I had a more well, I can't say normal because I haven't had a normal year since I started teaching, but if I had had more of a year similar in terms of the beginning to last year's, I might have seen more of a difference. I don't know. I also don't have a huge sample size. My sample size is 67 students. It's not a big sample size to go off of, and most of us aren't going to have a big sample size either, and that can affect significance of results as well. Some of the key changes I might do differently. Well, first off, as I was stating, hopefully the pandemic's not a big thing, because I could tell you one thing that probably skewed a lot of my data in terms of how closely students could work together and in terms of just being able to interact and talk with each other as they work through this process. Because this was, and I didn't clarify earlier, this was a paired activity. The students and myself were all under excess amounts of new unique stress, and that can counteract learning and counteract the ability to teach as it is. And then I feel moving forward, I would also want to adjust the activity more to create more defined parameters of expectations, just a little more detail in that end. I think I took something that was really, really scaffolded and laid out, and I went completely in the opposite direction, which was my goal, and not to give that. But I'm thinking I need to gear back that a little bit as well and add in a few more of those parameters to allow those students a little bit of a support jumping in. Because although it wasn't their first inquiry activity, it was still a new thing to them, and it could cause some confusion overall. One thing I do want to point out about my data is, if you look at my combined data, there's a couple of red marks there. That is because it's incomplete. I have a couple of students who, due to pandemic and live streaming needs, they haven't been able to get all of their data in. Either a home situation or a pandemic situation has caused them to not get that data, so I'm waiting for them to make up materials. But I was able to get most of the data all right, and in the previous year I already had it all saved and queued up. So that's it for my data analysis and my interpretations of that said data. I look forward to seeing the rest. I will be posting this video and the Excel sheet in my discussion, and I'll talk to you soon.